and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a comparison of living and teaching in Hong Kong versus living and teaching in Thailand. So I was in Hong Kong for over a year and I've been in Thailand now for pretty much bang on 2 years. And in both countries, I worked as an English teacher. I thought it'd be fun to do a little bit of a comparison just for anybody who is thinking about moving abroad, going to Asia, and taking up the first teaching job. Maybe this comparison will give you a better idea of where you want to live, be it for just a little while, for a year, or for a longer period of time. Let's get to it. Just some specifics before we get into the video. This video is going to be a comparison of living on Hong Kong Island versus living in Bangkok. I don't feel like I can compare Hong Kong to Thailand as a whole because I feel like living in Bangkok is completely different to living in the rest of Thailand. But for a lot of you out there, if it is your first teaching job, you're probably going to end up in Bangkok. That's why I'm doing the comparison to Bangkok specifically. And do bear in mind, for this list, I am comparing working and living in these countries at a basic entry level into a job. For Hong Kong, that means you're probably going to be teaching in a language center. And if you were to be teaching in Bangkok, you would probably be teaching for an agency, a language center, or a government school, or just some type of basic school. Just bear in mind, if you were to progress in the field of education, this list would look completely different because the lifestyle you could have in Hong Kong is completely different if you're actually qualified and do have the right qualifications, and your lifestyle in Thailand is also completely different if you do have the right qualifications. I'm going to be comparing working in both of these countries using some categories that I have compiled based on the pros and cons that I had made for each country. They all fell into these different categories, so let's get to it. Category number one, the salary in both of these countries. Now, Hong Kong is an expensive place to live. That's why the salary in Hong Kong is going to be a lot higher. So when I first started working in Hong Kong, my salary started at around 25,000 Hong Kong dollars a month, which is quite a generous salary. And the pro of this is that if you are careful with your money, you definitely can save a lot of money whilst living in Hong Kong. Depending on your situation and your lifestyle, you could probably save around 500 to 1,000 pounds a month, which is a pretty hefty savings. During non-pandemic times, with this salary, you can definitely afford to travel to other parts of Asia without having to worry about breaking the bank. However, the con of this is that you will be working like a dog for this money if you are working in a language center. When I was working in the language center, I was working around 46 hours a week. And again, when you're working for a language center, you don't get as much holiday because it's not like working in a school. You don't have the school holidays to have off. Each year, we were only allowed 20 days of holiday, and this included the public holidays and then some extra random days that the company chose we could have off. So in total, you only get 20 days of holiday, including public holidays already, which is not a lot of holiday at all. The public holidays are staggered throughout the year and you don't really have a lot of time off when you do have time off. Even though you have a high salary, you will be working for every single penny of that salary. And for Thailand, if you're at entry level, your salary is probably going to be around 40,000 to 50,000 baht a month. For anyone who's looking to live in Thailand long term or even just looking to go for a year, just remember that the salary is quite low by Western standards. And if you do not get any extra qualifications, it's unlikely that that salary is going to go up unless you do get lucky and find a higher paying job or you have some sort of connections. Your salary will probably stay pretty stagnant. I'll mention this in Thailand as well. Along with the salary, some jobs do not have a lot of benefits. This varies from job to job. Some jobs you won't have any type of health insurance, and for some jobs you also won't get paid for all of the holidays. So be careful when looking for jobs in Thailand. You probably are going to want a job that is going to give you some type of insurance, and make sure that all your holidays are paid throughout the year because some jobs, they won't pay you throughout the summer. So just keep that in mind. Another bad thing about the salary in Thailand is if you have some type of emergency, be it a medical emergency or having to take a trip home for whatever reason, your salary isn't really going to help cover the costs from any of those things happening to you because the salary is quite low. It will be very easy for you to have your savings wiped or be in a bit of trouble if a certain type of situation arises. For me personally, I ended up in hospital last year with dengue fever, which cost me around £1,000 for the hospital bill. And obviously due to the pandemic as well, school shut and I didn't get paid during the time that the school was closed because we didn't do the online. I basically lost all of my savings due to that hospital trip and not getting paid during the pandemic. So it would be a good idea to have some savings if you really do want to move to Thailand, because these kinds of situations can arise and one unfortunate situation can wipe you out. When I was in Hong Kong, I never really worried about this kind of thing happening. I believe the healthcare was relatively affordable and I wasn't always on edge about having some type of crazy accident in Hong Kong. So overall, in terms of salary, I would say the salary in Hong Kong is better. And if you're only looking to do a year of teaching just to save some money, I would recommend just going to Hong Kong, saving some money and then coming back home, because if you go to Thailand just for 1 year and you want to save money, you're probably not going to save any money. Number 2, the accommodation. So per kilometer square, Hong Kong is the 7th most populated place in the world. So as you can imagine, rent is high and what you get in terms of the price that you pay is not a lot at all in Hong Kong. I'll just show you guys. A 22.5 meter square room in Hong Kong will cost you around 15,500 Hong Kong dollars, which is around 1,400 pounds. And this is only 22.5 meters square, which is absolutely tiny. To counter this, we shared a flat with other people, and this meant you had a little bit more space and you did pay less. I believe people paid around 750 pounds to 800 pounds for a room within a shared flat, which is obviously a lot cheaper than renting a flat by yourself. So if you want to save some money, then share a flat with other people, but obviously the downside to that is that you have to share your space with other people and the space really isn't that big. Even though Bangkok is more densely populated compared to the rest of Thailand, it's nowhere near as densely populated as Hong Kong. So in Thailand, I believe the accommodation is excellent. You know, you really do get bang for your buck when you're living in Bangkok. So just to put it into perspective, the price that you pay in Hong Kong for a 22.5 square meter room, you could get a condo 10 times the size in Bangkok that is modern and is also in a trendy area. Even then, even if you weren't going to spend that amount of money, you can still get a pretty decent modern place in Bangkok that has a basic gym and a swimming pool for around 10,000 baht a month. So just to summarize here, I much prefer the accommodation in Thailand, Bangkok. I absolutely love my condo, and the accommodation is one of the reasons I love living in Thailand the most, because you can have such a nice space for so little money compared to other parts of the world. And in terms of housing for Hong Kong, I have 0 pros on my list for accommodation, so just keep that in mind. Category number 3 is travel. But just bear in mind, I haven't been able to really travel around Thailand due to the whole world situation. So in terms of travel, Hong Kong was really good for little day trips and little outings because there's so many different hikes that you can go on, and there are lots of beautiful beaches scattered around Hong Kong. And the great thing is, because Hong Kong Island is so small and it has really good transport links, traveling to a hike or traveling to a beach is only going to take you 1 to 2 hours maximum, because everything is so close together and well connected. And also these day trips are really good if you have a dog as well. The cons in terms of travel in Hong Kong is that you don't really do staycations or travel anywhere to really have a mini vacation. It would be much easier and much more affordable for you just to travel to a different part of Asia, somewhere cheaper to go on holiday. Hong Kong is expensive, as I mentioned before, so I don't really see the point in spending money and going on a mini staycation, and I didn't really hear of anyone ever doing that. In terms of travel in Thailand, you can travel to different parts of Thailand relatively easy, be it by taxi or buses or by car. I believe that in Thailand there's a lot more opportunity for cheap getaways and cheap staycations. So if you're feeling bored at the weekend, you could just book a hotel and go for a staycation, or you can travel away from Bangkok to a different part of Thailand such as Hua Hin or Pattaya and it's not too far away, and you can have a nice little relaxing weekend. And during one of the school holidays, if you wanted to, you could travel to down the south to many of the different islands that Thailand has to offer, and it would be a cheap and beautiful and relaxing holiday. You wouldn't necessarily need to travel out of Thailand to feel like you're getting away from Bangkok and having a relaxing time. But obviously a con of this is if you're someone who's bringing a pet over, or someone who's planning to get a pet, it's traveling around is not as easy if you don't have a car and you do have a dog, so just bear that in mind. Day trips are really nice in Hong Kong if you do have a dog, whereas in Bangkok we weren't able to really take our dog on day trips. They weren't as nice as the day trips that we had in Hong Kong. So in terms of having a dog, I think Hong Kong is a lot nicer for travel. But obviously now that I don't have a dog anymore, I'm really looking forward to being able to travel around Thailand and actually have a relaxing getaway without having to worry, and being able to enjoy Thailand to its fullest. Okay, next one is a comparison of work. In Hong Kong, I really did not enjoy working at a language center. There really isn't a work-life balance. As mentioned before, we were working around 46 hours a week, which is long if you are someone coming from the West. And as well, we didn't work Monday to Friday. We would work, say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, have Thursday off, work Friday, Saturday, and then have Sunday off. So basically your days off were staggered. It was very rare at my work anyways for people to have 2 consecutive days off. And again, with work, the days off were very limited and they were pre-selected. You couldn't select them yourself. In terms of the teaching, the amount of hours you will teach if you're working at a language center in Hong Kong is absolutely crazy. We were contracted to teach up to 30 hours a week, which is a lot of hours. Some days you would have 7 hours of teaching in a day, which is really challenging, especially when you're going from different age group to different age group. It was very challenging, and I personally found it very tiring, especially the days where you had 7 hours of teaching. They were horrible. Even though the teaching hours were up to 30 hours a week, they very rarely fell below 27 hours. So you'd still be teaching at least 5 hours a day. And yes, you could argue that if you're a teacher, teaching for more hours means more practice, but this really wasn't the case in Hong Kong because everything was pre-planned for you and you weren't able to kind of discipline the children or do anything in regards to building their social abilities. It was just repeating information to the students, which isn't what teaching is all about. I didn't really develop as much as I could have as a teacher in Hong Kong. I've actually developed a lot better as a teacher working in Thailand. More hours doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get better at something. And Thailand. One good thing about teaching in Thailand is the sabai mentality, which you could argue is also a con. I mean, it is a con at times, but it's also a pro. There's not too much pressure when you're teaching in Thailand. Everything is kind of sabai, laid back. And you know, if you're someone who doesn't like so much pressure, this is something that's good for you. In Thailand, you work a pretty basic 40-hour week, 8 hours a day. I work from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 p.m, which is really nice. It's a good balance of hours. I finish early enough so that I have time in the evening to go to the gym and relax and watch TV. Whereas in Hong Kong, you would start at 9 o'clock and not finish until 6 or 7 o'clock, which doesn't really leave you time to do anything. Earlier start in Thailand, but you finish earlier and you have time left to do other things and actually have a life. And as well, the contact teaching hours in Thailand. So at a kindergarten, you're with children all the time, so you do have quite a lot of contact hours, but you're not necessarily teaching all the time. I will say working at a kindergarten is pretty tiring because you are around kids for maybe 25, 26 hours a week, which is still a lot. But my partner who was working in high school, he only taught for around 12 to 15 hours a week, which is pretty much half the amount that he was teaching in Hong Kong. There's less pressure to be doing so much teaching. You do actually have downtime. You'd have time to prepare your classes, and it doesn't feel like you're a robot who is just churning out some pre-prepared material. You actually have time to prepare your own material and think about the classes that you're going to teach, and then actually have the energy to teach those classes as well, which is something that is really important when you're a teacher. You know, you don't want to hate your job. One of the cons for teaching in Thailand, which I personally have not experienced myself, is dodgy agencies. Just be careful of this. If you are applying to teach in Thailand, there are lots of dodgy agencies out there and they will take a big cut of your salary and there will just be dodgy things in the contract that you need to look out for, such as having to pay for your own work visa, which I'm pretty sure usually the school is meant to do. And just be wary of places that are going to make you work extra days, extra hours for no reason, or are really sketchy about holidays. Just watch out for this kind of stuff if you are working for an agency in Thailand. That is my only con for working in Thailand, is dodgy agencies. So there to summarize, obviously I much prefer working in Thailand. I absolutely love my job in Thailand. I feel like I've grown so much as a teacher. I've learned so much. I love the school. I love the students. I love everything about teaching in Thailand, and I don't really have much good to say about teaching in Hong Kong at a language center. I really just did not enjoy it. Maybe the one pro I could give is that I figured out what age of student I prefer teaching, and I did get to experience teaching a wide range of students and a wide range of different subjects. I will give it that. And now to talk about the food. So as we know, Thailand is renowned for its wonderful food. And yes, this is a pro of living in Thailand. Thai food is absolutely delicious, and you can buy Thai street food for around 40 baht a dish, which I believe is £1. And the Western restaurants in Thailand tend to be cheaper than the Western restaurants in Hong Kong. I remember one time I ate out in Hong Kong and I bought a tofu bagel, which I know sounds disgusting, and it was around £10 for this one tofu bagel, and it was pretty much 2 pieces of bread and like a steamed piece of tofu, and that was £10. We went to a restaurant on High Street and it was around £14 for just this piece of garlic bread, which was a piece of bread with some slashes and a little bit of garlic butter on it, and that was £14. And even though the salary is high in Hong Kong, I really don't feel like you can justify selling a piece of garlic bread for £14. And another pro of the food in Thailand is you pretty much can afford to eat out every night. You could eat street food every single day if you wanted to, but even then, even if you didn't want to eat street food, you can still get a decent meal that's a bit more Western for around 200-300 baht, and you can have that for your dinner, you know, and you're not necessarily going to break the bank doing that. Your food budget will probably go over 10,000 baht a month, but it's still within reason compared to your salary. So if you really didn't want to cook in Thailand, you definitely can afford to not have to cook. The pros of the food in Hong Kong. I'm just gonna put it out there, I really did not enjoy the food in Hong Kong at all. So pro for the food in Hong Kong is I really did like the cheap local bakeries that just seem to be scattered around everywhere in Hong Kong Island. You just go in with your tray or your tongs and you just pick up lots of cheap, tasty baked goods. I will say, relative to the salary in Hong Kong, Western groceries are more affordable in Hong Kong because your salary is pretty high. So whenever I did grocery shopping, I never really was umming and ahhing about the price of any Western goods. I would be able to just pick up whatever Western good I wanted, and it was all affordable relative to the salary. Whereas in Thailand, Western goods are really expensive compared to the salary, and I really don't buy that many Western products because it can just get ridiculously expensive. And the cons for the food in Hong Kong. I did not like the food in Hong Kong, and if you're a vegetarian, it can be a little bit tricky too. The local food is nowhere near as delicious as the local food in Thailand. It just lacks flavor, and it doesn't have the seasoning and the spice that Thai food has. It is all pretty bland. So if you don't want to eat local food all the time in Hong Kong, then you're going to have to spend more money eating out at the more Western restaurants, which is something you can't afford to do every single night. You would just rack up a huge food bill, and then in turn you wouldn't be able to save any money, which for me personally was pointless. I would rather save money than eat out every night. In order to make sure that I was able to save money, I just ended up cooking a lot of my meals. I know some people who ate out all the time, but they didn't really save any money, so you have to kind of pick and choose what you value more. If you want to eat out all the time and not cook, you're probably not going to save any money, so just bear that in mind. So in summary, when it comes to food, I prefer the food in Thailand. It's incomparable. Thai food is amazing. Even if you're a vegetarian, you can get some good Thai food. It's not necessarily going to be healthy, but the times that you do eat Thai food, it's going to be delicious. And the last category is the environment. So I've just put lots of bullet points within this because it's about the kind of overall environment. One of the pros about living in Hong Kong in relation to the environment is that it is very pet friendly. You know, I never really had any issues having a pet. And in Hong Kong, there are nice places that you can relax during the daytime in relation to cafes or restaurants. There usually is some type of seating that is outdoors or seating that's inside, but the windows are opened up, so you could pretty much just sit there all day, relax, take in the nice weather, take in the cleaner air. We definitely enjoyed sitting at restaurants with our dog and just spending the whole day there and just relaxing. And another pro is that there's always somewhere nice within walking distance to where you live, so if you wanted to just pop out, go to a cafe or go to a restaurant, you could pretty much just walk there. And if somewhere wasn't close to you, you could just get the MTR. The MTR is very well connected all over Hong Kong. There's so many MTR stops placed all around Hong Kong. So if somewhere wasn't within walking distance, there would be an MTR station pretty much within walking distance to where you live. And then you could just hop on the MTR and go to wherever you want to go. I never had to really walk more than 5-10 minutes to get to an MTR stop. It's very well connected. You can get to places easy. It's easy to walk there. You don't really need to take a taxi. This one might be a bit controversial, but the people in Hong Kong are really nice. You never have to worry about being ripped off in Hong Kong because you're a foreigner. I never experienced this personally, but obviously because Hong Kong is so densely populated, one of the cons about the environment is that it is just very, very overcrowded. And you know, when it's hot and it's overcrowded and you're trying to get from point A to B, it can be pretty stressful and overwhelming. So if you're someone who gets stressed out by crowded places, just bear that in mind. If you're living in Hong Kong, it pretty much is constantly busy. And the environment in Thailand, remember this just pertains to Bangkok, because I know the environment in different parts of Thailand would be completely different, because you know, if I was comparing Hong Kong to somewhere like Koh Samui, it would be completely different. So Bangkok has wonderful night markets that you can go to. It also has wonderful food markets such as W District, where you can sit, have a cheap beer, relax with friends. I love that nighttime atmosphere in Bangkok. It's something that you always remember when you've traveled there. It's just that nighttime atmosphere that is really fun to be around. In Bangkok, there's pretty much something for everyone at a fair price. As I've said before, you can sit and have a beer at a market, which is really cheap, or you can go to a rooftop bar and splash out lots of money. It's really up to you. I believe there is something for everyone. And the cons of the environment in Bangkok, Thailand. The streets are very unfriendly for people. The streets are primarily built for cars, so if you want to walk around parts of Bangkok, it is pretty difficult. You know, sometimes the streets are narrow, there's holes in the streets, there's construction work going on, motorbikes driving down the pavement. It's not very pedestrian friendly compared to Hong Kong. Like, I could pretty much walk my dog anywhere in Hong Kong, whereas in Thailand, I was absolutely terrified of walking my dog on any of the busy streets. That's why we had to move to a place with quiet side streets so that we could walk our dog in the morning without having to be worried about something bad happening to her. If you don't have a car and you are going to be walking more places, this is going to be something that is annoying for you. Like, I don't have a car, so walking around is pretty stressful, but obviously you can avoid this. If you get a taxi or you do get a car, you don't need to walk around. And another thing is the mosquitoes in Thailand. Now, obviously, I did get dengue fever before, so now I'm absolutely terrified of being bitten by a mosquito, because when I had dengue fever, I ended up in hospital for 5 days. It was such an unpleasant experience. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. It's one of the worst things I've ever gone through. Now I'm just constantly scared whenever I see a mosquito, because I never want to go through that experience again. So one of the downsides of living in Thailand is the mosquitoes and the fear of getting dengue fever. Another con about the environment in Thailand, and I'm probably going to get some hate for this, but people will try to rip you you off. I'm not saying that people in Thailand aren't nice. There are lots of nice people in Bangkok, lots of nice people in Thailand, just like there is in any other part of the world. But the one thing that you have to worry about in Thailand or Bangkok is people are going to try and rip you off because you are a foreigner. I'm sure every foreigner living in Thailand has experienced this, and you know, it isn't a nice experience at the end of the day, especially if you're someone who is very anxious. You do get worried about being ripped off, especially when you're on your own and you don't really speak the language that well. You're going to find yourself in a tricky situation if you are being ripped off. And another problem with that is that, you know, in Thailand we have this whole thing of saving face. It's not recommended that you argue with someone who's trying to rip you off because you don't want to make them lose face. It's such a terrible thing to make people lose face, and just the whole being ripped off and then not being able to argue with someone so that they don't lose face. It's just a big no-no for me, as I'm sure it is for many people. It's just something that is not pleasant about living in Thailand. I never had that experience in Hong Kong. No one ever tried to rip me off because I'm a foreigner. Everyone was fair. Prices were fair, and you know, the people just kind of got on with it. But obviously I understand if you learn to speak the language, you can help mitigate this. So if you do move to Thailand, you probably should try to pick up some of the language because it will help you out in those types of situations. Whereas in Hong Kong, you don't really need to learn Cantonese because everyone pretty much speaks English. So in summary, in terms of the environment, I prefer the environment of Hong Kong in the daytime, being able to go sit and relax at restaurants and enjoy the weather. But I will say Bangkok is much nicer in terms of evening atmosphere. Like I said to you before, going to markets and going for drinks is something that is really enjoyable. So Hong Kong in the daytime and Bangkok in the evening. And that pretty much sums up my comparison, or else this video is going to get way too long. I'm sorry if there's things that I missed out. Do let me know if you think there is something that I missed out. And I just want to remind you guys that I am comparing living and working in these places at a basic entry level into teaching. If I'd have had the right qualifications and teaching experience to find a well-paying job in Hong Kong, my quality of life would have been so much more different. You know, I would have had all the paid school holidays. I probably would have had some type of housing allowance. So therefore, I would have had a lot more money. I probably would have had a nicer apartment, and I would have actually had a lot more time off to go and enjoy all the wonderful things that Hong Kong has to offer. Sadly, I was working at a language center that didn't allow for this. And some of the best memories I had in Hong Kong were the things that I got to do with my dog. Things such as going to Discovery Bay and taking my dog just to walk around the island is so nice. And these are things that I've not really had a chance to do in Bangkok because it's just not as dog friendly. Keep that in mind as well. If you have a dog, living in both of these places is going to be completely different as well. And living in Bangkok with a dog is a lot trickier than living in Hong Kong with a dog. And obviously, if you get the correct qualifications in Thailand as well, then your quality of life will go up too. You know, you will have a higher salary that could be double the initial entry salary into teaching, and you will get paid holidays. You'll probably get medical insurance, you'll get trips home, and your quality of life and salary will definitely go up. So just keep that in mind. You know, if you want to stay long term, I definitely would recommend trying to get some qualifications, because regardless of which country you're in, your quality of life will go up. Anyways, I just wanted to make this list because I feel like there's going to be a lot of people who are contemplating moving out to Asia and getting a teaching job, and you're contemplating where to live and work, and you're not really sure which is going to be the best for you. So I hope that this list and comparison helped you figure out which place might be the best place for you to go. I cherish my time in Hong Kong, and I'm enjoying my time in Bangkok at the minute. My view is just my view, and you know, someone else may see things completely different to the way I do. I am looking at these countries based on my experience, so just keep that in mind too. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, and if you're enjoying the content, do be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one.